Welcome to this next episode of YouTube, where I've entitled it Maturing Behavior with a Question Mark. As I've been speaking about in the last few episodes of YouTube, Luna and Boltz will be maturing to 3-year-olds next spring, and we certainly are watching this winter to be one of those times when we might see a change in the rank order or see some posturing towards Aiden from the male rank order. Luna is not going to see that because Luna is the only female, so she's pretty much dominant by default. But one thing that's interesting here is this is Luna coming up and choosing to lie down next to Aiden, and that's a little bit of a sign of that maturing, possibly more serious pair bonding behavior that we've been looking for from Luna, and that's a good thing. There's a lot of research in the wild that talks about sleeping distances between the dominant pair decreases as they get closer to their breeding season. So as we said before, we don't breed wolves here, but we still see some of those pair bonding behaviors. And this is Denali, who approaches Aiden in a submissive posture with a tail wag, very respectful. And we don't see any likelihood that Denali's going to try to push some status. As a matter of fact, Denali likes to have his food, and he likes to be somewhat inconspicuous as possible. And we're actually getting a little bit of rain here, and here's Denali trying to hide a 136-pound body under a 1.5-foot long balsam branch. So he sometimes doesn't have the best judgment about cover. But Denali's, like I said, very social, very engaging, but also really showing no indication of wanting to move up in rank. Very comfortable with where he is. Of course, when you find a comfortable place to lie down here, and it's not very long before the rest of the social pack members join you, and here's Luna coming to disrupt Denali's rest, and Boltz not too far behind, but pretty calm. You know, this is one of the times of the year where it can be either way. It can get really intense very quickly, or it can kind of be a calm transition into some of those winter hormones. And because we've had such a warm fall, it's been in the 60s and 70s, we're taking the slow road into the winter hormones, so things are pretty calm and certainly very, very interactive. There's not any wolf who's isolated themselves. There's not any wolf who's getting harassed or picked on. This is Aiden here coming up the hill. The only thing that we did see is that there was a period of time when we were holding off Boltz and Denali to get a little bit of extra confidence for Boltz and Denali, and we've stopped doing that. We got Boltz's confidence back up, and so we're finding that he was getting a little bit too confident by having some special attention. So one thing with wolves is you have to be able to watch separation. Separation can create a drive to test when they get back together, so we definitely want to watch those bouts of moving animals in and out of enclosures. This is Aiden. The other thing you may have just witnessed there was a little bit of yawning behavior. Certainly that kind of yawning, licking of the lips is a little bit of an expression of anxiety, and so we definitely want to watch how Aiden's feeling physically, but also psychologically. Typically, Luna wouldn't let Denali lie still for very long without kind of wrestling with him or jumping on him or doing something like that, and it's clearly pretty calm here. Obviously, Denali's aware of Boltz coming up and Luna on the other side, but there's not any energy that suggests that there's going to be any kind of roughhousing or any kind of posturing over Denali. He stays pretty calm and rests underneath the tree there. So you can see here Boltz is getting his full winter coat. He's definitely filling out a little bit more. He is no longer that kind of skinny yearling young adult that he was. He's posturing quite well. He's maneuvering quite well, and he's actually engaging really well with Aiden. He's got his moments where he's a little bit testing, and here one of the difficulties for me trying to film is that Aiden often wants to greet, so I'm going to have to take a little bit of a break here while Aiden paws me and tries to get me to greet. But Boltz is watching, and he's very mindful of what goes on with Aiden, but he's not really pushing Aiden at all. The only time we see Boltz having issues or trying to push status on Aiden is if Luna is engaging Aiden in any dominance. Then they kind of tag up together. So we really are keeping an eye on that, and all staff are really alerted to, any little posturing can be something that we want to be aware of and we want to monitor. So here's Boltz sniffing on a tree. Wolves do investigate the majority of their time. I would say split between resting and investigating. These little bouts of dominance that you get video clips of, they don't last very long, and they're not a big part of their day. Their day is investigating what the ravens have dropped and, you know, what birds have landed, and certainly the smells that occur after a rain, or, you know, if ravens are feeding on something. We've even had ravens drop things in the parking lot. They pick things up from other areas, drop them here. They pick up things from this enclosure, drop them elsewhere. So there's always something coming out of the trees that are worth investigating. So as I said, these calm signs are probably an indication that Luna's maturing. And when I look at this clip here, for Boltz to walk behind Luna and Luna not ambush him, that's a pretty calm day. There certainly have been times when Boltz hasn't been so lucky to walk behind a tree and not have Luna waiting for him to jump on him. So the other thing is here, look at the way Denali is resting. Denali is laying flat on his side, and he is extremely calm. So that's, again, a side rest. And typically, when they're comfortable, they're going to be sprawled out like that. If they're uncomfortable, they may be in what we call a sphinx rest, where their front feet are up and underneath their chest, so they're ready to spring up at pretty much a moment's notice. Here's Denali's flat on the side. He's resting, no concern whatsoever with these 2-year-olds behind him. And so Boltz is going to proceed to lie down as well with his back to Luna. That's another indication that he's not too worried about her. Now, of course, not saying that calm is the overall tone. As I said, they do have their short bouts of dominance, and this is one of them. You'll notice, hopefully by the footage, I've got a footage here that is, the sun is setting, so this sunset time is typically an active time. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock is typically when the wolves start kind of getting up and moving. And again, we do have a webinar next Tuesday on the 28th. It starts at 5 o'clock, and that actually webinar is going to feature obviously this time frame, but also I'm going to drain the pond, which is always stimulating for the wolves, because there's things at the bottom of the pond, maybe minnows, maybe, who knows, a bone that they dropped, or bacon, or whatever that was left in the bottom of the pond. Or else we're also going to put in the straw beds for the winter. They get their first straw bed because we have had a fairly warm fall, so we haven't had any straw in yet, but the nights are going to cool off, and by next Tuesday we're going to be below freezing, so we'll want to make sure that Luna's comfortable, and that's always a good stimulus for them. So like I said, that 4 or 5 o'clock time frame when the sun sets is when the wolves get up and get a little bit active and start to posture themselves. And I'm certainly watching this guy, watching how Boltz is doing and how he's fitting in and how he's posturing, because he is definitely moving up. And so when I watch this clip here, Boltz comes behind. He's trying to engage Aiden in a direct eye stare. Aiden has no part of it, and he goes along his business with a T2 tail straight back, and Boltz again is left up on the hills. So that's a good indication that while Boltz is posturing, Aiden's definitely taking it in stride. And over in the east side, Grizzer again enjoying 3 different enclosures, but also having the opportunity to really have to watch 3 different enclosures. That means what are staff doing, and when they're picking up scat, he's following them around, making sure they aren't getting into his caches. He just recently had a deer fawn, actually. We fed for him on Saturday night, and he was very interested in where the staff were, where they were collecting scat and making sure that they weren't disrupting his food cache. So one thing that always people say is, oh, Grizzer, he's alone and he must be sad, and and we work very hard to try to make sure that he's very content and very stimulated. But one of the other things I always want to say to people is that just because he's 10 does not mean that he's not a wolf, and he doesn't have his moments. So in that clip, he was taking advantage of a new staff pouring in some water in the enclosure, and when she had her back turned to him, he gave her a little bit of a jump on the back and posture to her, and then of course checks out everything we do and makes us do our work twice as hard or twice as many times. Especially when we give water, he likes to paw it out and just mess with it. So then we need to wash his water bowls again and refill it. And this time, safer for the staff to refill from the outside of the enclosure than the end. So, like I said, these 10-year-olds, a lot of times people become complacent because they're older. Wolves are curious and wolves are opportunistic, and when the new staff have their back turned to them, that's a good opportunity for the wolves to show some status, and that's what Grizzer did there. So that's one of those things where we can't solve that. That's what wolves do. They look for opportunities, and here he is scent marking or scent rolling on our cleaned waterers. So they do have heated waters. Obviously, this time of the year, we start turning on the water heaters and make sure that they constantly have a good source of water. And like I say, here, Grizzer is going into the east side enclosure now, and that's where the webcam is, and that's where hopefully people get to see him. He's been quite active here at the front because the pack's been active in the front, so Grizzer's been kind of in the front area. Like I said, we're keeping an eye on Boltz and seeing some pretty and keen activity. Denali's thinking that he's not all that thrilled about the keen activity, but it goes back and forth. This is Luna and Denali going after Boltz, and so we see it's not just Denali who's getting dominant. So anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.